Hello, everybody. It's been a couple weeks since you last saw me, but uh, stuff's been crazy. Life has been crazy between work and all the insanity that went on with my technology. I broke my cell phone on Labor Day, and it took 2 weeks to get the thing fixed, which is absolutely absurd, but that was the boat I was left on. And a bunch of other stuff got in the way and prevented me from making some of the videos I wanted to make. But I'm back now. Hopefully you all will enjoy this. I'm filming this on Tuesday evening around dinner time, right before SmackDown starts. So I actually do plan on watching. I already watched Clash of Champions, and I watched Raw last night. And I'm going to watch SmackDown tonight, and then I'm going to watch the debut of NXT on USA tomorrow night. So I'm just getting, after not watching WWE at all since SummerSlam, I'm now like getting my fill of WWE and just overloading pretty much. But we'll see how everything goes. I have a lot of thoughts on NXT in particular, stuff I've talked about. I'm not super excited for the fact that they're going on USA and the fact that they're going to 2 hours and it's going to be live every week and they're basically turning it into Yellow Raw. Not a fan of that. But we'll see how it goes. I think the first night will probably be balls to the walls because it's the first night, and then we'll see how they do on a continual basis and if they're able to keep up any kind of sustained momentum. Now, one thing I think they need to understand is that great matches are great, and those long epic matches are fine. But if you do them every week, people are going to get burnt out on it, and you got to have storylines mapped up, and you got to have those hooks to keep us wanting to come week after week because after a while great matches, you get them all the time, they don't feel as special anymore. And NXT was able to thrive, at least creatively, by having simple shows, largely squash matches on TV, and then they come through when it comes time to do the takeovers, and that's been their successful formula for last 5 years or so. And now they're going to USA, and they're going to have to completely change how they do things. And there's a way to do it, but I hope that they don't overexert themselves and oversaturate themselves and just become another brand of the WWE that kind of gets lost in the shuffle and kind of numbs my senses to everything that I see every week. So hoping for the best. We'll see how it goes. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens when AEW starts up on TNT. We'll have the Wednesday night wars, as it were. But in any case, I want to talk about Clash of Champions. I saw that on Sunday night, and overall, I did not hate the show. But I didn't love it either. It's another. That's been the story of WWE pay-per-views this year. It's like I don't think I've outright hated any of them, but at least none of them stand out in my memories being particularly bad, but none of them stand out in my memories being particularly good either. They're just kind of like these overly long, middle-of-the-road shows with a couple of good things that keep me from hating the show. So, I could almost sum up every WWE pay-per-view the exact same way. All the 2019 ones, anyway. It's like, yeah, I didn't hate it, but didn't like it either, if that makes any sense. So this show was more the same, but they did do some things that I thought were pretty cool, and I want to highlight the good, that's for sure. So I'm going to review the show. We had two pre-show matches, the triple threat match for the Cruiserweight title, which I did not watch, and the United States title match, which I saw in progress. I flipped on the show as it was happening, and I was shocked that AJ Styles was on the pre-show. I was like, what? What the hell? And he pretty much dominated and controlled Cedric Alexander for most of what I saw, and got a fairly easy win. And I guess that's fine. Fine for AJ and establishing him as a strong champion. Doesn't do much for Cedric, but especially what they did with him the next night on Raw. So it's like, all right, so you're keeping your champion strong, which is good. But what was the point of putting Cedric in that spot if he was just going to get fed to AJ on a silver platter anyway? But might as well just kept him in the Cruiserweight division, But in any case, that was the pre-show. Not a whole lot to say there. Then we started off with the Raw Tag Team Championship. The team of Bobby Roode, or Robert Roode, the Glorious One, and Dolph Ziggler defeating Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman for the Raw Tag titles, to the surprise of no one. I figured that Strowman and Seth were going to have some kind of a miscommunication that led to them losing the titles. It's pretty much what happened. I thought the match was okay. I thought it was solid. It was nice to see Roode and Ziggler get to actually do something, because I do like both guys. I've liked Robert Roode for a long time, since the mid-2000s, And Ziggler was one of those guys I was singing the praises of a decade ago and just always gets the rug out pulled from under him. So I guess here it's nice that they're at least doing something. And Bobby Roode did get a pin over the Universal Champion, so that's something too. And I didn't like what they did on Raw the next night where they did the Bobby Roode, I keep calling him Bobby Roode, Robert Roode, Seth Rollins match. And Dolph Ziggler did a run-in to cause a disqualification and cost his tag team partner the match. I'm never a fan of doing that. Unless you're a heel champion saving a title, I don't like that type of finish because it's like, look, you're still costing your guy the match. He still lost. And, I know people weigh pinfall victories above DQ victories, but a loss is a loss, and Robert's he's taking the L anyway, so what's the point of doing the run-in? It's not like, I mean, theoretically, in my head, winner share of the purse and loser share of the purse is still a thing. That's my headcanon. As look, he still lost. He's still taking the loser share of the purse, It's so it doesn't really matter. But, whatever. That was that. So, I thought the match was solid. It was fine for what it was. I expected it to be the opener, given that Strowman and Rollins were going to be having the match later in the show. I was kind of hoping that they would do a thing where Strowman and Rollins would argue inside the ring and come to blows, and security has to keep them apart, just to add a little bit more sizzle to the main event later in the show. But from there, we got a Bayley versus Charlotte Flair for the SmackDown Women's title. This match was weird because Bayley or Charlotte felt like she was working heel the whole match, and then they did that good idea for a finish with Charlotte taking the exposed turnbuckle shot to the face and Bayley getting a sneaky win, Bayley being a heel now, which is an unexpected heel turn, I guess. I guess my big problem with that is that as a heel, she still has to cut promos, and she's going to have to rely on her promo skills a little bit more, and promos has never been Bayley's strong point, ever. She's never been good on the stick. But as a face, you don't... Or especially being the type of face that she was, is you don't really have to be the best on the mic. You just have to convey that, underdog, can-do attitude that people liked her for. But as a heel, you kind of have to be a little bit stronger on the mic, and I don't see her being able to pull it off. But anyway, this match felt a little off to me, but I like the idea of the finish itself. Maybe it wasn't executed that well, and the match itself came off a little weird because Charlotte was basically the heel the whole match until Bayley got a sneaky win in. So, but it was what it was. The next match I enjoyed, it was the Revival defeating the New Day to become the new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. What I liked what they did here was that the Revival actually did something that they could do in future matches and actually set them up for a fall down the road, where they didn't want to take the pinfall win over Xavier right away. They exploited his injury, locked him in that reverse figure four. I don't know what it's called, or a weird version of an Indian deathlock, whatever you want to call it, and decided to exploit the leg injury to win the titles when they could have gone for the pin and not injured him. And what I'd like to see, and moving forward, and this would actually give the Revival, the heels, something for fans to hate them about, where it's they don't take the win right away. They just kind of pound on the punishment and make the baby faces suffer before getting the win. I kind of the equivalent of that would be you're watching a football game and a team's up 42-0 and they still got their starting quarterback in and they're throwing the ball on fourth down trying to get touchdowns, and it's in the fourth quarter. It's come on guys, you're just being dicks now. It's kind of like that, only they're actually hurting people too, so it has that added layer to it. And where was I going to go with this? So yeah, I think that could be a direction for Revival matches moving down the road, where they can actually do something bad, get heat for it, and then eventually a babyface team is going to make them pay, and make them pay for their hubris and being cocky and wanting to hurt people instead of just taking the pin when they've got it. I think that could be a really good setup down the road and give the Revival something in their matches to really set them apart from all the other teams. I like the Revival anyway. Like I said, they're kind of the modern day, at least style-wise, they're the modern day equivalent to Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and I just love watching them work. So giving them a little bit extra something to do, I think, is a really good move. So I was actually happy with this match. Next up was a match I didn't give a shit about. It was Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross defeating Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville for the women's tag team titles. Champions retained. The only thing that really stood out to me in this match was Nikki Cross got a couple of laughs, like mimicking Mandy Rose, but other than that, there's really nothing for me to get attached to here. They did some of the 24/7 title stuff here, which was probably more interesting than the match itself. I'm still not a fan of the 24/7 title thing. I wasn't a fan of the stuff they did with Kane the next night on Raw, although there was a payoff to it that I'll talk about later. But um, the actual 24/7 title stuff, I just can't be bothered to care about it, to be perfectly honest. And I'm already like, I feel like I'm watching the same thing every single time, and it still begs the question: why the hell would anybody even want this thing to begin with? But in any case, that was that. Next up was probably my pick for match of the night: Shinsuke Nakamura with Sami Zayn, recently injured by The Undertaker, defeating The Miz to retain his Intercontinental title. This match was real good. Probably the best match I've seen Nakamura have in a dog's age. He's one of those guys that kind of got watered down by the WWE, and his run didn't go as most of us hoped, but I think now he's kind of like, I guess he's motivated again now that he has a belt. The Sammy partnership is a little off to me. I think Sammy comes off as, I guess it's trying to be like the new age Jimmy Hart, constantly talking throughout the matches, but that can get distracting after a while. And I thought it was getting a little distracting with Sami Zayn here. But other than that, I thought the match was pretty good. And some nice drama in it, as I legitimately didn't know who was going to win. So I went into the match with absolutely zero expectations and came out of it thoroughly pleased. I thought it was a really good match and I enjoyed it. Again, probably my favorite match on the show. Next up was Becky Lynch versus Sasha Banks for the Raw Women's title, which Sasha won by disqualification when Becky accidentally hit a referee with a chair. I wouldn't have done this match at this pay-per-view. I know Sasha just came back and, and they set up that feud and then they did the Bayley heel turn. There's a tendency in the WWE and other wrestling companies, and this is something that AEW should look to avoid. Just because you do something on TV doesn't mean that you have to wrap it up at the very next pay-per-view. You don't have to have the match at the very next pay-per-view. Again, I constantly use Sting and Hogan from WCW as an example of that, of how to do it right. You can have stories ongoing, you can have smaller stories in between, especially in the once-a-month pay-per-view format. It's like you just burn through everything too quickly. And instead of doing Sasha versus Becky at this show, I would have done Becky versus somebody else and have Sasha, interfere after, or attack Becky after the match, and have Becky, or Bayley and Sasha attack after the match, or something like that. Maybe Sasha helps Bayley retain the title against Charlotte, and then Bayley and Sasha attack Becky after this, whoever they put up against her in this match. Might as well be Natalya again, whatever. Lacey Evans again, something that we've already seen before. And the reason I advocate for that is you have this somewhat hot thing that people are interested in. I don't see any reason to rush the first match, and it almost forces your hand to do kind of this double disqualification or this draw. And, Becky lost by DQ, but kind of forces you to do this kind of non-finish thing because you don't want to have the story wrapped up right away. So instead, I probably would have saved it for later, let the story build and simmer a little bit, and done something else at this show to kind of help lead into a bigger match down the road. I'm going to talk about that again when I talk about The Fiend versus Seth Rollins, but another great example of this is Undertaker versus Kane. Kane attacks Undertaker at the Hell in a Cell match. They don't have a match until WrestleMania. They did plenty of stuff in between, like Kane, they fed him Mankind, they fed him Vader. They kept Undertaker distracted by going after Shawn and going after the title. There were plenty of things to do in between before doing Taker Kane at WrestleMania. So I wish that same logic would come back and we would see it applied, where it's like you got something big that people want to see. You know what the big matches, but you can do smaller matches in between. Again, especially when there's so much content that the WWE has. You don't need to do one match and then do that same match 19 times, because it's going to be Becky and Sasha at the next pay-per-view at least. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did it 5 more times. I was joking on Twitter last night when they had their segment on Raw with the chairs, and Charlotte helped Becky. I was like, okay, so it's going to be Becky and Sasha in a chairs match in December at TLC, possibly even Becky and Charlotte versus Bayley and Sasha in a chairs match. And we'll see how the draft turns out, obviously, but I just wish they would kind of learn how to save matches for later. And again, I know it's hard with all the content they have to fill, but I probably wouldn't have done Becky and Sasha at this pay-per-view, not so soon after Sasha's return. And I guess now is a good time to bring up the Sasha Banks Chronicle special that they did on the network right after this pay-per-view, which I watched because I was interested. in seeing like her talk about why she walked out and what were all the circumstances there. Unfortunately, I was a little disappointed. She was very vague about why she walked out and what the circumstances were and what was true and what wasn't. Um, at one point, she said the reports of her crying in her hotel room WrestleMania night weren't true. I'm like, I didn't hear that. I heard you threw a hissy fit in the locker room. That's what I heard. But again, I don't know what's true and what's not. But for the most part, she just said I was depressed, I had anxiety, I was stressed, and all that type of stuff. But it was very vague about like the reasons for those things coming about. And she did talk about the Page injury, which I would imagine that would take its toll on somebody. If you accidentally hurt somebody. I mean, Rey Mysterio killed a guy, and I don't want to know what that does to a person. But other than that, I thought she was very, very vague, and it was something that was kind of built up as being like, you get the true answers, the true story. It just kind of fell flat in that regard. It was kind of cool to see her prepping for her return, and all that stuff was nice, and her emotional reactions to everything. But they kind of played it up as one thing, and it ended up being kind of vague and not like the tell-all story that was kind of being promoted. Again, I feel like she doesn't owe me any answers. If she doesn't want to divulge any personal information, that's fine. I'm just saying maybe you shouldn't produce the special and WWE shouldn't advertise it as, you get the true story or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was fine for what it was, but it's not a must-see, like, tell-all inside look into Sasha Banks that I think some people may have thought it was going to be. Any case, I've spent all this time gibbering and jabbering. I haven't talked about the match itself. I thought Sasha and Becky was a solid match. I thought it was alright. Even the brawl after the match, after the ref bump, was kind of neat and kind of exciting to see. But it's also clear that they're saving it for something bigger down the road. They're going to have a match in Hell in a Cell, probably in Hell in a Cell. And overall, I thought it was good for what it was. I didn't necessarily love it, but it was a solid outing all the same. Next up was a match I could not be bothered to give two shits about. Kofi Kingston defending the WWE title against Randy Orton. He won clean, which I hope to God means this will be the end of this feud. I thought this match was so boring, and I was just ready for it to be over. I was like, please just end this goddamn match now. It reminded me of some of Cena's matches where it's like, I don't give a fuck who wins, just end this shit right now. It's like some of the Cena-Rusev matches, for example, that just went on and on and on and on, and I was like, I stopped caring like 15 minutes ago. In this case, I didn't care from the word go. We got Randy Orton, who's bored me for years, and Kofi Kingston, whose title reign has long overstayed its welcome. There's no good option here. I'm like, all right, Kofi retained. I guess that's good because we don't have to suffer through Randy Orton for the 800th time. But what else is there to do with Kofi at this point? There's no real heel being built up. Not that I'm aware of. I guess I'll find out on SmackDown tonight. But there's no real heel. I guess maybe Eric Rowan would be the next challenger. Who knows? But there's just not a whole lot going on. And I just want Kofi's reign to end. Like, just let it end, and then maybe SmackDown can get interesting again. But I'm going to watch it tonight, so hey, we'll see. So yeah, that was that match. I didn't give a shit. It was the one thing on the show that I hated. Like, everything else I was kind of okay with, match-wise. That was the one match I truly just made me angry, because I was bored to tears. Another thing that pissed me off was the Street Profits segment, which was absolutely awful, and I don't understand what the point of them is. I don't mind comedy in wrestling. I like comedy in wrestling. But could you actually be funny? And it's like, what in the hell is going on where they bring these guys up from NXT and just give them dog shit? And this is dog shit material, and Booker T couldn't even make it funny. It was just, it gets to a point where it's just guys saying stuff. And that's kind of what this felt like. Now, that said, they did have a funny line on Raw the next night. Maria on a pole match, that's how she got into this mess. And I'm like, okay, that was good. I'll give you that one. That one was good. But they were painful on the Clash of Champions show. But, yeah, then from there, we got the one non-title match on the show. Eric Rowan defeating Roman Reigns in a no DQ match with help from his former partner, Luke Harper, who's back now. A nice little moment on the show. I thought the ending was good. I thought the match dragged in the early stages, but picked up a bit at the end, and ended up being okay. And I thought the surprise of Luke Harper's return at the end made it worth it. It's like, all right, so now we got the Bludgeon Brothers, the former Wyatt family, back together, and they're gonna tear shit up, I guess, on SmackDown. I guess at this point, now that he's beat Roman, I mean, Eric Rowan, got to be in line for a title shot, right? I mean, I don't know, but I mean that's kind of where I mean, who else do you throw up as a heel against Kofi Kingston at this point? Um, so maybe turn Kofi heel. Who knows? I mean, I don't fucking know, but so yeah, that was fine for what it was, and I feel like they got out of that unscathed, if that makes any sense. If not a great match, at least they got out of it unscathed. Then we had the main event. Seth Rollins defeating Braun Strowman to retain the Universal title to the surprise of absolutely no one. Braun Strowman has become like the WWE's modern day version of Abyss, where Abyss was like the trademark big guy for TNA when I first started watching in like '04 and '05. And then eventually he started to lose a lot, and if you put him in there with somebody of any kind of value, like an AJ Styles or a Monty Brown or somebody like that, Jeff Hardy, like there's a, you know, 90% chance that Abyss was going to lose. And it's like, all right, how scary is your big scary monster, and how formidable is your big scary monster if he loses all the time? And that's where we kind of are with Strowman, where he's this big imposing guy, got over, one of those guys that got over, had a good presentation, but then you put him in the big matches and he loses all the time. It's like, well, how effective is the monster? What does it really matter what his size is or what his size advantage is if he loses all the time? So that's unfortunate to see what's happened to Braun. I thought the match itself was okay. They did some cool stuff in there. The ending got a little finisher festy for me, where it's just spamming. And I get they were trying to protect Strowman and the size and everything, but it just got repetitive. Look, if he kicks out of a stomp, instead of doing the stomp 3 or 4 more times, I would do like, all right, that means Seth has to come up with something big for the finish. Instead of you're just doing the same move over and over again. I was like, that's kind of anticlimactic and boring. I'd rather do like some kind of a crafty finish or come up with something cool to kind of close on, rather than just doing the same move over and over again. But overall, I thought the match was okay. Seth won, again, to the surprise of no one. The real talking point, though, was post-match, where The Fiend came out and attacked Seth Rollins, making it clear his intentions to win the Universal title. Now, I will use this to talk about what happened on Raw the next night, where it is now official. The Fiend will be challenging Seth Rollins for the title at Hell in a Cell. In a Hell in a Cell match, I assume. I thought I heard that correctly. Again, very much like what I said about Becky and Sasha, I would not do The Fiend and Seth Rollins right away. I would have saved it for a later show. Again, just because you do something on TV doesn't mean you have to do the match at the very next pay-per-view. You can save it for later, and I think The Fiend is a fresh, hot new act, and I think there's plenty of time to, like, feed people to him, and you could have had him get a squash match at the next pay-per-view, and Seth could have had a match with AJ Styles, because he's kind of in, like, the pseudo conflict with AJ right now, and AJ had a big, dominating win at Clash of Champions, and he's firmly established as the U.S. champion, so he's, like, the number 2 guy by default, so it would make sense to do Seth versus AJ. And you wouldn't have too hard of a time, like, saying that AJ's worthy of the title. And Seth, there's plenty of time, or with Bray, there's plenty of room to keep feeding him people. Like, he squashed Finn Balor at SummerSlam. That was great. He beat up Mick Foley, which was great. He beat up Kane the next night on Raw, which almost never happens when... he's gotten over on Foley and Kane, and normally when the legends show up, the legend goes over the newer guy, which I said is a terrible idea, because you're just telling everybody that this guy sucks compared to the guy that's basically retired. And so it's nice to see Bray, like, getting over on these guys. It's like, okay, are they serious about Bray here? Because he's over. And they've basically booked themselves into a corner here where it's a Hell in a Cell match, so you can't do, like, you can't do what they did with Becky at this pay-per-view. They've got to have a finish, right? Clean finish. Bray's got to go over. I mean, he has to. He's the best character in the company. He's over as fuck. People are digging the character. They're doing the match at the next pay-per-view. They booked themselves into that corner. I think Bray has to win. There's no other... I mean, if he doesn't win, you're kind of ruining it. I think Bray absolutely has to win at the next pay-per-view. There's no getting out of it. And if Seth walks out with the belt, I think that is a huge mistake. They've got, like, this believable killer monster character. Like, okay, the opposite of what I said about Braun. Bray is actually beating people. He is destroying people. Stole the mandible claw from Foley. Used it on him. Beat him down. Beat the shit out of Kane. Beat him down. He squashed Finn Balor on pay-per-view, and Finn's considered to be, like, a, not necessarily a top-tier guy, but in the top or, higher-tier caliber guys, and Bray squashed him. It's yeah, I mean, you seem pretty serious about making a monster out of this guy. People love the presentation. I said he stole the show at SummerSlam. Arguably stole the show at Clash of Champions too with that ending. Stole Raw last night with that ending. I I think he's got to win. There's no other option. I think your hands are tied, WWE. He has got to win the title. If he doesn't, that's a huge, 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 huge blunder on your part. I think he absolutely has to win at Hell in a Cell. There's no other way they can go with it. I don't think, but we'll see how that goes. So that was Clash of Champions. Like I said, I didn't hate the show. There were a couple things I liked, but nothing that really stood out to me either. It was just kind of a, well, that show happened type of thing. But it was cool to see Bray. It was cool to see Luke Harper come back. It was cool to see the Sasha Becky brawl was cool. So they did a couple of cool things to kind of provide some hooks, which is what I said was missing from All Out. It's like they had some hooks for the TV show. So I'll give it that. And Raw the next night was not terrible. Again, Bray continues to be the standout part of the show. Don't like the 24/7 stuff. The Maria stuff was cringy as hell. There's a nugget of a good idea there by making Mike Bennett the kind of put upon battered husband, as it were, but it's just the way they're doing it is just awful. And it's just not working. Like, who's my baby's daddy? It's Rusev. I'm like, this is stupid. Like, this is really stupid. So that stuff doesn't work for me. But, yeah, again, the Bray stuff is going really well. And, yeah, well, and we'll see more when the draft happens. I think it's really good that they're doing the draft. I think it's really good that they're getting rid of the wild card rule, which thank God that's happening. We had the finals to the King of the Ring tournament last night, a tournament I've not watched any of except for the finals, so I have no idea how Corbin and Gable got to their positions in the finals. Corbin won to the surprise of no one. Match was all right, but Corbin win felt like a foregone conclusion. I'm like, yep, that went about how I expected it to. So it's like, all right, King Corbin gets a king gimmick now. That's great. Hopefully it turns out better than the Constable, but in any case. Yeah, but going back to my earlier point, I think Bray Wyatt absolutely needs to win at Hell in a Cell. I will be saying that until the show takes place, and we'll see what happens. So, that concludes my talk of WWE, really. We'll just have to see how everything turns out and where everything goes. Again, I'm going to be watching SmackDown tonight, and I'm going to be watching NXT tomorrow night, so plenty more to cover. And there'll be another video for me later in the week. It's going to be a What Went Wrong, and I might have a review of NXT's first episode and a SmackDown discussion on there as well. So be on the lookout for that. I promise the video will be happening later this week. I also want to start up that live stream series that I wanted to do. I'll spoil what it is. I was going to watch all the Starrcades. So it's going to be a watch-along. I'd be watching all the Starrcades from 1983 all the way to the final entry in 2000. So that was the plan. So I want to start that up soon, maybe sometime next week. So again, we'll see how everything goes. But for right now, I think it's time to talk some non-wrestling stuff, because y'all, for those of you that actually care about my opinion of non-wrestling things, there are a few things I want to talk about. Let's start with my Giants, who are horrible, absolutely terrible. They're 0-2. The Cowboys danced circles around us in week 1, and the Buffalo Bills, which I didn't see any of that game, thank God. It wasn't airing in my area, but the Buffalo Bills put up 28 points on us. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, those two losses basically led to Eli Manning getting benched and Daniel Jones being made my starting quarterback. My opinion of that, you kind of had to make that move. No disrespect to Eli. I love Eli Manning to death. The man won us 2 Super Bowls. I will be a fan of that man forever and a day. But our defense is so bad. And it is truly horrible. Like, it is so bad. Our offense is going to have to put up 42 points a game just to keep ahead of our lousy defense that can't stop shit. No pass rush. Every third down gets converted. Like, no turnovers. It's terrible. It is absolutely terrible how bad our defense is. And right now, Eli Manning is just not sparking the offense to put up the kind of points that we need to put up to win games. So let's see what Daniel Jones can do. Let's see if some of that good play he brought to the preseason, which I didn't take that too seriously because it's preseason, and like, fuck, the Giants were undefeated in preseason. I'm like, that doesn't mean shit. And Well, look at us right now. We're 0-2. Undefeated in preseason, but we're 0-2 now. Don't give a shit. Um, it also doesn't help that Golden Tate was suspended right before the season, and he's still gone until week 5. It's like, Jesus Christ. Ugh. Oh God, if we didn't have Saquon Barkley, I would literally have no reason to watch a Giants game. But I love Saquon. He's my boy. I love that guy. But again, I think it's a tough decision that had to be made, but I think it's one that you had to make just to see what you got in this kid, and just to see just maybe, he can make magic happen. Who knows? I think we're still going to lose. I mean, if our defense can't get any stops, it doesn't matter who's under center. Our offensive line is better. At least, Eli wasn't running around for his life like he was all last season. But so I'm not worried about Daniel Jones getting hurt. So that's good. But it's God. Yeah, I mean, he's gonna have to be a prodigy of like Joe Montana level proportions to win games for us, because our defense is so bad that I just don't see us being able to stop anybody for the foreseeable future unless major changes are made. Major changes. So that's my take on that. It's sad to see where my Giants are right now, but maybe Daniel Jones is the solution, or at least a partial solution to fixing our woes. And I would even say maybe they can trade Eli and get something for him, and Eli can go to a team that needs him. There are plenty of teams looking for a quarterback right now. Big Ben's done, and Drew Brees got hurt. Jacksonville has a shit show going on. Miami's a shit show going on right now. I'm sure any of those teams would love to have Eli Manning right now. I'm sure Colin Kaepernick has probably gotten some calls too. But anyway, that's enough football talk, and yeah. I'll have plenty more reasons. I'm sure the Giants will give me more reasons to drink and be miserable for the remainder of the season, but that is that. A couple of other things I wanted to talk about. One movie that I saw and one TV show that I saw on Netflix. And I talked about them briefly on Twitter, but I want to, review them here because sure, why not? It's a little late. The movie's been out for a couple weeks. The movie I'm excited for is Rambo, which is happening. It comes out later this week. I'm watching the fuck out of that. I can't wait to see Rambo Last Blood. It's probably the last movie this year I'm truly excited for. But one movie I was excited for was It Chapter 2. And I can honestly say it was the most disappointing movie I've seen this year. And the reason I say that is because I liked part 1, even though it has flaws, and it does. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but I liked part 1 because it fixed a lot of the problems that I had with both the book and the original TV miniseries with Tim Curry as the clown, Pennywise. The book is an overly long, overly complicated mess. Great premise, but it's a goddamn mess. And anybody that reads it is bound to get a headache, because that thing is it is a miserable read. For many, many reasons. Way too long, way too complicated, a bunch of shit that doesn't make sense, which is standard fare for Stephen King. The thing I've always said about Stephen King's writings is that he typically has really good prose. Like, it reads very well, and they're page-turners. But if you analyze the story for more than 5 minutes, it falls apart under logic. Like, he doesn't even adhere to the internal logic of the shit that he sets up a lot of the time. It's why it's like some of his movie adaptations are better than the books. Like, Misery. Way better movie than the book. Like, I think the movie's vastly superior to the book. The Shining, I much prefer The Shining, even though I much prefer the movie version of The Shining, even though my one knock on that movie is that the whole like point is that it's supposed to be a tragedy that the father goes insane and becomes a psycho killer. By casting Jack Nicholson in the role, he already looks unhinged before they even get to the hotel. So it's like, he already looks like a crazy man, so it's not, like, some of that tragedy is kind of lost, but, and I still prefer the movie. I think the movie's great. And the book has some problems. Small example, the book, I believe it's hedge animals, that come to life, and that seems stupid, but in the movie, it's a giant hedge maze, which is a perfect setting for the climax. And it was like, oh my god, that was great. So much better in the movie. But, yeah, so I guess that's my rundown of some of Stephen King's writings. Again, it's not a universal truth, but it's a generality. Generally, that's how I feel about Stephen King novels. And It is like the ultimate, like, oh my god, what the fuck is this thing? But and the TV movie trimmed some of the fat, but had some of those same problems, and it's just not fucking scary. That's the other thing. The movie is not scary at all. The only way I can enjoy that thing is if I look at it as a comedy, because I think Tim Curry is absolutely hilarious in it. Like, I think he's charming, delightful, funny. He's not scary, like, remotely. And so I was disappointed when I saw this in high school. And for years, people told me it's one of the scariest things ever made. And when I finally saw it, I was like, "Did you guys see this when you were 5? And is that why you think it's scary?" Because I remember episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark, which are scarier than this. Like, come on, this thing is not scary, but a lot of people think it's scary. I disagree. What It Chapter 1 did, the new movie, it actually made the clown kind of scary. The clown actually works as a horror figure in that movie, which is a step in the right direction. And it trimmed enough of the fat to where it's a more straightforward story. Again, there's a few oddities in it. Could have done without seeing the kids strip down to their skivvies and go swimming in the hole together. It's like, that's like any kind of weird like sexualization of children I get like a little queasy towards. Like, should I be arrested for watching this? And oddly enough, when I first read the book, I was like, should I be arrested for reading this? And the book takes it in directions that nothing should ever be allowed to go. But that's all I'm going to say on that. But I thought the first movie was overall really effective and fixed a lot of the problems that I had with the book and the original TV movie. And fortunately, it stands well enough on its own to where I don't need a second movie, but I thought the second movie was going to continue and be much more the same, and it was going to be good. Oh my god, this thing is almost 3 hours long, so it's overly long and overly bloated, much like the TV movie, much like the book was. The pacing's all over the place. The constant jumping back and forth between flashbacks and the present day is choppy at best. And the worst part about all of it is that the movie is not scary. So much so that it's like, I don't even know if they were trying to be funny or if they were trying to be scary and just failed miserably. I guess I can get into slight spoilers here. There's a scene that completely rips off a moment from John Carpenter's The Thing, so much so that it's not scary at all because they just straight up ripped it off. There's a scene where a Paul Bunyan statue comes to life and starts trying to chop at one of the kids, and I'm like, is this for fucking... What the fuck? Come on. Like, am I supposed to be scared of this? And one of my big issues with the book, it was a huge issue with the TV movie, ending it with a giant spider is silly. It's stupid. And ridiculous. This movie not only ended with a giant spider... It made it worse by ending with a giant spider with Pennywise's face superimposed over the CGI spider. And I was like, oh my god. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Oh my god. And all sorts of... The movie is filled with moments like that where it just gets too stupid. The scene in the trailer with the granny, and who turns into a monster and attacks Beverly... effective scene in the trailer, not so effective in the movie when you see what the granny monster looks like. She has googly eyes and floppy tits, and I'm like, great, you're kind of reminding me of Evil Dead, and Evil Dead is an over-the-top kind of screwball comedy in a way with a lot of slapstick. Evil Dead, especially the second one, lives up to what it's trying to do, so that works beautifully. Here, it's like, I legitimately don't know if you're trying to be scary, if you're trying to be funny, because it's not funny, and it's definitely not scary, so you just kind of end up failing at both. I guess it's kind of funny in that it's so bad it's kind of hilarious, but man, wow, that was disappointing. The only thing that keeps me from giving it like a full-on fuck you F rating and as a D is there are a couple scenes that work. The scene underneath the bleachers was really good. The scene in the funhouse with Pennywise attacking the kid and all the mirrors there, that was really good. Those are the two best scenes in the movie. And the two scenes that kind of reminded me of what Pennywise was like in Chapter 1. And those scenes kind of work. Unfortunately, they don't factor into the main plot at all. They kind of work as these little like short story scenes that just kind of got inserted into the movie. And unfortunately, the movie is just an unbridled mess. Of all the actors, I guess they're okay. The only one that really leaves an impression to me is Bill Hader. Everyone else, it's like, oh no, no. They just didn't have good material to work with. I guess that was the major problem. But in any case, yeah, Chapter 2 I thought was a disappointment. And it's a shame because it's one of the movies I was looking forward to this year, and I thought it let me down, which is unfortunate. But hopefully Rambo lives up to my expectations. I don't need that to be an award-winning film. I just need it to be fucking awesome. There's a difference. Like, I just need it to be Stallone awesome, being awesome. That's all I need from that movie. But in any case, I also want to review something that I was super excited about, which was on Netflix, dropped a couple weeks ago. Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, the prequel series to the original film. Dark Crystal was one of those movies that I grew up with. Loved it as a kid. It was one of those movies that captured my imagination. And the idea of an entire movie with nothing but puppets, created by Jim Henson, of all people, who's like the king of, movie magic and puppets and everything, was like a treat to me as a kid. And Labyrinth was very much the same way, where I was just blown away by whatever he was able to create and the different creatures and all the different puppets that inhabit the world. And so many of the creatures in both of those movies, Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, just look so alive to me. I'll never forget the first time I watched Dark Crystal. And it's the scene where the Skeksis are sitting around a dinner table having dinner. And that's all it is. It's just them having dinner. And they're all acting gross, and they're slobbering all over the place, and burping, and all this other stuff. And I remember watching it as a kid and thinking, okay, I know they're not real, but goddamn, they're really fooling me right now, because they look so alive right now. And I guess that's the type of thing that you get with puppets, that you just don't get the same thing with CGI unless you really, really go the extra mile with it, like a Gollum or Caesar from Planet of the Apes, or several of the apes, Maurice as well. But generally, that's the type of like believability that you get out of a puppet or any kind of practical effect that isn't always there for CGI. As much as I enjoyed the Godzilla movie earlier this year, to me, Godzilla will always be a man in a rubber suit, and it's just not exactly the same when he's all CGI. Again, I like the Legendary Pictures films, but it's still not quite the same. But anyway, so when I heard that they were doing a Dark Crystal prequel show, I was like, oh, cool. I like the Dark Crystal. I wouldn't mind seeing more of that. And, I love that world so much that there's plenty of room to go back in and explore that world. And it was a prequel series. And they did it, once again, all with puppets. There's some CGI in there, but for generally every creature in this world is a puppet of some kind. The Gelflings, the Skeksis, Aughra. All the characters come back from, all the species come back from the original film, not all the characters. The Podlings, the Landstriders, the Fizzgigs, all those creatures, and a bunch of new ones as well. And so I was really excited to see what they were able to do and to see if a puppet show could basically work with a high-level type of fantasy story. And after watching this, I'm happy to report that it delivered in spades. I absolutely loved the show. Loved it. Might be my favorite thing I've seen this year. And again, it was just like that handcrafted approach, simple storytelling, and in ways like, because it's a TV show and it's 10 episodes and they have a bunch of characters to balance, they were able to like explore all these different character arcs and storylines and everything. And I got about halfway through the show and I was like, I think this show's a better Game of Thrones than Game of Thrones was last season. I think this is like, oh my god, Dark Crystal gave us a better season of Game of Thrones than Game of Thrones did this year. That's crazy. But yeah, no, I thought the show was very, very good. And I was just happy to see something that looks like that again. Tell a very good fantasy story. It was really, really well done. The puppets all look great. The characters all sound great. Simon Pegg is the voice of the Chamberlain, and the Chamberlain was probably the most memorable Skeksis from the film. And Simon Pegg's voice for the Chamberlain is so spot on, it gives off the impression that he'd been practicing for this role for 30 years. Mark Hamill is the voice of the scientist Skeksis, and I get a simple joy out of hearing Mark Hamill's voice come out of a Skeksis. It's the greatest thing on this planet I didn't even know I wanted. And really, I look back at this, and I guess my only real knock, and it's not really a knock per se, would be, by the end of the season, it doesn't entirely line up with the events of the film. Doesn't mean it contradicts necessarily. It means that they left the door open for a season 2 for more to be filled in. And I just hope if they do a season 2, and I hope we get a season 2, that they're able to like better fit in with how events are in the film. Perfect example, in the show, we see the creation of a device where the scientist creates this device that drains the essence of being strapped into a chair, and the Skeksis are able to consume the essence that is absorbed by the crystal. And this is from the original film. It's the same device that's used in the original film, and in the prequel series, we get to see the creation of that device. In the show, the creatures strapped to the chair die. In the movie, they kind of just become brainless zombies. So there's a contradiction there, and I don't know how they're going to address that, or if they're going to address that, and I just need to go along with the change. But like I said, overall, it's generally very, very good. And if that's my only complaint, I mean, it's like, this show was a home run. I thought it was great. I liked pretty much all the characters, and I enjoyed all the different plot lines, because there's different, large cast of characters, by the way, because there's 10 Skeksis. In the original film, there's 10. And we don't really get to spend a whole lot of time with all of them individually. The only ones that leave much of an impression are the Gartham Master, who becomes the Emperor, the Chamberlain, who's the most memorable one, and the Scientist. Other than that, they're all just kind of there filling up the screen. Here we get to see a little bit more individual personalities from the different Skeksis. We also get to see new characters, new Skeksis, and the Mystics. We get to see a very interesting relationship introduced about halfway through the series. We get this great podling character named Hup, who's probably my favorite new character. We get in the original film, there's only 2 Gelflings. In this show, we get a whole society of Gelflings and many different characters to follow. So, with all those different characters in only 10 episodes, you kind of expect everything to collapse under the weight of itself. But no, I thought it went very, very well, and I was very happy with it. And it's that old school Henson magic that, not necessarily what he brought to the Muppets, because the Muppets was kind of a different thing, where that was more like broader entertainment. But when he did like the creature shop stuff, again with Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and the Storyteller, which is massively underrated, when he did those things, that had like the work of like creating something really unique and special, and with a very unique vision. And it was so refreshing to see something like that again through the Dark Crystal. So thank you to everybody that worked on this thing. I was super, super happy with it. It's nostalgic without being pandering. It's creative without trying too hard. It's not complicated. I feel like kids could watch this. It's a little intense, but the original movie was a little intense. It's got some of that 80s flair. They didn't dumb it down, which I was glad to see that. There are harsher elements in the Dark Crystal film and in this show, and I was glad that they kept that, because kids' entertainment today, I feel like they get softballed too much, where it's like just put in like a ton of jokes, some musical numbers, pop culture references, and keep it bright and happy and keep the kids happy. Can't give them something like The Secret of NIMH. Can't do that. And I'm like, but why not? I loved The Secret of NIMH when I was a kid. See, I guess I was different. As a kid, I kind of liked the harsher things, because it kind of challenged me a little bit and made me feel like I was watching something I wasn't supposed to be watching. But now it's just like, no, you can't do that for kids. No. So I was happy to see the Dark Crystal, this new show, kind of like stick to its roots and be like, no, we're not gonna shy away from death or the harshness of this world, and we're gonna stay true to the source material. And thank God that they did, because it was a wonderful experience. And like I said, nostalgic without being pandering, creative without being complicated, no like real pandering involved or anything like that. They just made something really, really good, and I was super happy about it, and I think everybody should watch it. And the best part is, I don't feel like you need to see the original film to really appreciate the show. I think the show stands well enough on its own that you can just watch it and enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, so that's my recommendation for Netflix. Go watch The Dark Crystal. It is great. Right now I'm watching Twilight Zone. The real Twilight Zone, the old one, the good one. And it's like, God, that's so much fun going back and watching that shit again. But yeah, I guess after I'm done with Twilight Zone, I'm going to have to find something else. But in any case, that is all I have for you now. Thanks again for watching me ramble. Glad to be back. Glad to be making videos. And I'll have more videos lined up for you over the next couple of weeks. So be on the lookout for all of that. But that is all I have for you now. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy SmackDown tonight. Enjoy NXT tomorrow night. And I will see you all later.